Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
6:07, O'Connor and Company. Good morning. It's a busy and potentially historic day in Washington, D.C. as the reconciliation tax cut package continues to make its way through the House. Are they still debating, or are they ready for a vote yet? Can we get a visual on that? They should be voting this morning. Coming up in 30 minutes, we're going to hear from the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, Congressman Andy Harris of Maryland. Hopefully the vote will be done, or he'll step out into the cloakroom, as they call it. Isn't it a cloakroom? Did anyone wear cloaks anymore? You've been to the cloakroom?
It's just a room filled with cloaks.
Cloaks. 7:05, Paula Scanlon getting an apology from the University of Pennsylvania. 8:05, Katie McFarland. And then at 8:35, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Jason Smith, doing a victory lap on this tax cut. That's all coming up. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
You know, I'm just going to start reading directly from Miranda Devine's exclusive report at the New York Post. This broke yesterday midday, and it was backed up by a statement from Director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe. A bombshell new CIA review of the Obama administration's spy agency's assessment that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election to help Donald Trump was deliberately corrupted by then CIA Director John Brennan, FBI Director James Comey, and Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, who were excessively involved in its drafting and rushed its completion in a chaotic, atypical, and markedly unconventional process that raised questions of a potential political motive. You remember when all of the Democrats, all of the people in the media, even a good handful of Republicans, you know the Republicans, the ones who started left-wing websites and now call for the defunding of DHS, Bill Kristol,
Right.
Those guys,
Right,
yeah.
right.
They kept repeating the same talking point over and over again. 17 intelligence agencies have found that the Russians helped Trump and there was collusion between the Trump campaign. They kept repeating the same thing, 17 agencies, 17 agencies, 17 agencies. Which was ridiculous, of course, because it included, an agent, the Coast Guard, and the intelligence agency for the post office and the Department of Agriculture. They were all over that. The reason that they repeated that line, the potential or the supposed rationale for that statement was that DNI James Clapper, the role that Tulsi Gabbard has now, he signed off on this, and he's in charge of all 17 agencies. So obviously, all 17 agencies. So that lie was already a joke and was exploded. But they rushed this thing out between Election Day and Inauguration Day in those months because they wanted that talking point. They wanted to put it out there that Trump was an illegitimate president, that he was just Putin's puppet, and that this whole thing was rigged. That's the only way Hillary could lose. John Brennan, then the CIA director, briefed Barack Obama, the president of the United States, in, I think it was April or May of that election year, telling President Obama that the Clinton campaign had created this narrative. So John Brennan knew this. John Brennan knew that the Russian collusion hoax and the Steele dossier was a creation of the Clinton campaign. Barack Obama knew it too. But they went ahead and did this anyway. They used the intelligence agency. So I'm sorry. I said I was just going to read Miranda Devine's article, but I was so entrenched in this story when it was going on that I felt like I wanted to jump out. All right. Further, Brennan's decision to include the discredited Steele dossier over the objections of the CIA's most senior Russian experts undermined the credibility of the assessment. The Tradecraft review of the 2016 Intelligence Community Assessment on Russian election interference was conducted by career professionals at the CIA's Directorate of Analysis and was commissioned by CIA Director John Ratcliffe in May. The Lessons Learned review found that on December 6, 2016, 6 weeks before his presidency ended, Barack Obama ordered the assessment, which concluded that Russian President Vladimir Putin aspired to help Trump win the election. The review identified multiple procedural anomalies that undermined the credibility of the intelligence community in America, including a highly compressed production timeline, stringent compartmentation, and excessive involvement of agency heads. Excessive involvement of agency heads means John Brennan, James Comey, and James Clapper leaned on these people and said, put this in the report. We want the report to say this, so make it say that. This was the Obama administration. This was President Barack Obama directing his FBI director, his CIA director, and his DNI to do this. And they did it. And I want to know who's going to pay for it. Who's going to jail?
This is traitorous, what they did. Absolutely. And I think it's also important to mention those men that you just listed are regularly on MSNBC and CNN. They have paid almost no price for this, Larry.
They've paid literally no price for it.
No price. Their reputations are still intact with the mainstream media.
They're heroes.
Comey, how many books has he written now?
Trump tried to strip John Brennan of his clearance, and it got restored. He still has top secret clearance.
That is unbelievable.
The review found that Brennan directed the compilation of the ICA and that his, Comey's, and Clapper's, quoting now, direct engagement in the ICA's development was highly unusual in both scope and intensity and risked stifling analytic debate. In other words, the boss let it be known exactly what they wanted this thing to say, and they made sure that it said it. And that's why they would go on cable news and continue to go on cable news and perpetuate this lie and undermine it. And listen, a lot of times the narrative here is that they were doing it to harm Trump, and they were undermining the Trump presidency, and they were angry that Trump beat Hillary, and they were angry that Trump was so mean to them and used naughty words in his tweets, and so therefore they just, this is what they did. Fine, and I'm sure there's a lot of truth to that. But set it aside for a moment. This is CIA Director John Brennan, Director of National Intelligence James Comer, Director of the FBI James Comey, and the President of the United States, not undermining and harming Donald Trump. This is them undermining the American people.
Yes.
This is them undermining our Constitution, undermining our process. We, the people, elected a president, and they, in their final days on their way out of office, created this narrative, created this thing with the fake imprimatur of the CIA, FBI, and all the other intelligence agencies to undermine the election that just happened. It's interference of an election after the fact. They were the ones who interfered with the election.
And then, look, when we talked about Biden's decline, we often talked about how Obama's people were so involved in the Biden administration and how Obama kept an office, kept a home here in Washington. And there were always former Obama people going in and out of that house, and how it is this all goes back. I know we're talking about these three men, but this
we're talking about Obama.
Obama's the boss. This all goes back to Obama.
Obama knew it. What did Obama know? When did he know it? He knew all of this. CIA Director John Ratcliffe yesterday said all the world can now see the truth. Brennan, Clapper, and Comey manipulated intelligence and silenced career professionals, all to get Trump. Thank you to the career CIA officers who conducted this review and exposed the fact. It's going to take years for these agencies to restore any level of credibility. When they say things, we won't believe them. We will always now wonder and doubt if intelligence that they are giving us has been politically manipulated. Yep. They burned the whole damn thing down because they hated Trump, and they hated you for voting for him. And I ask once again, who goes to jail? It's 6:15.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman from Georgia, has proposed a new bill. I think we briefly mentioned it yesterday, but let's get into the details of it now because it appears that President Trump is 100% behind this effort, and it is to change the way the census is currently conducted in this country. At the moment, the census counts every individual living in this country by congressional district. And these numbers are hugely important. Not only does it determine federal benefits and payouts based on population, if you live in this state and there's this many people living there, then if federal grants are being doled out or federal benefits of any kind, there's dollar figures basically attached out of the federal government for every single person in this country. It's also critically important because as the census occurs, then you reapportion congressional districts to represent those people who live in a given state. So as people leave a state like Illinois, New York, and California and move to states like Tennessee and Florida and Texas, those states get more representation in the House of Representatives, and the states that are losing population get fewer people representing them. That's important in the House of Representatives. It's also important in the Electoral College for the president, because you determine who your president is based on the number of members of the House of Representatives you have. So the more members of the House you have, the more votes for president you get. So given all of that, up until now, the census count has counted every single living human being regardless of immigration status, whether they're citizens, whether they're legal residents, or whether they're illegal immigrants. Everyone wondering why was Biden flying all of these illegal immigrants from the border to places like New York and Maryland and Illinois? I'll tell you why. So that they could get more Democrat members of the House, and they could get more members of the Electoral College for the Democrats represented there. Yeah. If all of those illegal immigrants crossed the border and stayed in Texas, Texas would be a powerhouse in terms of the Electoral College in the House of Representatives right now. That's why. And Marjorie Taylor Greene says enough is enough. He says the new census should only count U.S. citizens for congressional redistricting, and Democrats are going insane.
It's, again, one of these very commonsensical kind of moves where Americans really scratch their head. Most Americans will scratch their heads and go, wait a minute, what?
Why is
It's
that,
not just
a problem?
You know, I do find some of these things to be kind of funny. It's like when there's a scientific study proving the sky is blue, or I don't know, that you can't change your sex, or some other things that are just so obvious. Yes. This is another one of these, and good for her for introducing this. You know, she gets a lot of heat, especially on the right. So this is a great bill to introduce.
Well, and I said it appears as though President Trump is behind it. President Trump has indicated that he would support this as well. They're calling it Making American Elections Great Again, by the way.
Creative.
Why not?
It's like Hollywood redoing another movie. Come on, folks.
Out of Fox News write-up, President Trump is reportedly backing Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene's new bill that would exclude illegal immigrants from the census. Once it becomes law, by the way, this is the most important provision, the U.S. Census Bureau would be required to conduct a new census immediately. So we'd have a new count. In other words, we'd have a new count in time for the next election. It would completely change the map, not just for the House of Representatives, but also for the next presidential election. There's a joke going around, a meme, I think it's from Babylon Bee, that has says, illegal immigrants removed from census, leaving California with population of 12. I mean, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. All right, so this will be challenged.
Of course.
100%, because a lot of people are saying it's a great idea. Even people who are in favor of it say fantastic, wonderful. Problem is the Constitution.
Oh.
See, so here's what the Constitution says. U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, as modified by the 14th Amendment, because remember, the 14th Amendment allowed for the counting in the census for the African slaves that were here in this country.
Okay.
Before the 14th Amendment, they were counted as, I believe, 1/5. Remember, that was the big fight.
The compromise, yes.
Right. And they said, okay, because the southern states wanted slaves counted. And the northern state says, well, no, they're not citizens, and you own them as chattel. It's outrageous.
Right.
You know, you want your representation based on people who can't vote. It's disgusting. And the compromise, I believe, was, well, each slave counts as 1/5, which is dehumanizing and despicable.
Yes, but there was some other reason for that. I don't know the details of that, but we can
anyway. 14th Amendment revised that, and so everyone in this country. But here's the problem: this is what the language is. Requires that the congressional representation be based on, quote, whole number of persons in each state. It says persons in the Constitution, not citizens. And forever that's been interpreted as if you're here, you're counted. Because whether you're a citizen or not, you're still a drain on the federal budget, and therefore I guess you get representation. I mean, I think that there's a fair argument to be made that only people who vote or are eligible to vote should be represented in the federal government. But that's where this fight is going to go down.
Yeah. And, and a lot of these communities are going to say, okay, I get it, but, we base some funding on the census, funding for services on the census, and they're not disappearing. They're still here.
Right.
And our states are still strained because of that. So, of course,
Right.
this opens it up to the everyone's dying, babies are dying, babies are starving argument, which we will, of course, because that's the first thing the Democrats will say.
Big part of it comes from funding for schools. Yeah. Because regardless of your legal status in this country, if you're a child, you get a public education. That's been determined by the Supreme Court as well. And again, this could be a domino effect and all of these things change. But as of now, because that student has to get educated in a public school, then the people in that district say, well, where's the money for it? You can't just saddle us with having to do that and not actually fund it. And so the federal government's been funding that. And that's another reason why they believe that those people should all be counted in the census. It's going to be a huge fight, but it's going to be a fascinating one and one that we should be having. It's 6:24.
Coming up, we're going to talk to Maryland Rep. Andy Harris. He'll give us an update on the big, beautiful bill, when they're going to vote, if they're going to vote, what's the latest. And he'll finally tell Larry what actually is in the cloakroom. Is it filled with cloaks? We'll find out. Keep it here. It's 6:30.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
6:36 on this busy Thursday morning, 3rd day of July. Everyone trying to get out of town for the Independence Day holiday, but there's a lot of business being done right now in the House of Representatives after pulling an all-nighter. Congress is now still debating before the final vote here on the reconciliation tax cut package. Coming up at 7:05, we're going to check in with Paula Scanlon. She's a member of the University of Pennsylvania swim team who's getting an apology from that university. 8:05 brings us KT McFarland on the Middle East, and then 8:35 we'll speak with Chairman Jason Smith of the Ways and Means Committee. One could call him the architect of the big, beautiful bill. That's all coming up. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Joining us now, Congressman from Maryland and chair of the very important Freedom Caucus. He's Andy Harris. Are you in the cloakroom, Congressman Harris?
No, I'm in my office waiting to get called back to the floor to pass the one big, beautiful bill, and we expect it any minute now.
Yeah, Hakeem Jeffries has been is he doing a Cory Booker impersonation? I think he's been talking for an hour now on the House floor.
Yeah, we figured he'd talk for about an hour, but, again, he'll run out of steam and he'll lose the vote.
As many doubts as I have about this bill, and there are doubts with regard to the debt and the size and scope of the government and the debt ceiling, and I know as the chairman of the Freedom Caucus you have those concerns as well. The more hysteria I hear from the Democrats, frankly, tells me that this has got to be a great bill if they hate it so much. How are you balancing? Well, first of all, give us definitively where you stand, because I know you opted out of a couple of the votes overnight. Are you a yes today?
Yeah, I'm going to vote for this because we were able to make certain that we got commitments to, again, even outside of this bill, to reduce the federal deficit. We realized that we've got about $1.5 trillion in savings in this bill, which is incredibly important. And, of course, it does produce the tax policy that the president has campaigned on.
So that tells me, great. And listen, that's how I've always looked at this as well. I think a lot of people look at this as a reconciliation package, get the tax cuts, and then we're all for reducing spending and reforming entitlements, do that in regular order. So what's the plan for that, assuming you have the votes? Do you go right into committee like as soon as possible and start doing that hard work? Because the fiscal budget is due pretty soon.
Well, I think that's the next order of business is the appropriations bill. I think that the House is going to mark up an appropriations process that's about $45 billion under last year's spending. So even despite, the small rate of inflation we have, we're actually going to mark up a budget that's actually lower for this year. And that's how we get us started on a pathway to what I call fiscal sanity.
How are the Republicans sort of messaging on this? The Democrats, you probably saw last night, they were in full selfie, camera to 2 millimeters from their face, talking about how people are going to die and how the world is coming to an end. How do you reassure voters about this bill and sort of reassure them maybe that the Republicans, there will be a second bill that will address some of the spending and some of the fears about our debt and deficits?
Well, certainly what the Democrats are trying to do is create fears about, again, people dying, us pushing people off health care, the hysteria that we always hear from the Democrats. The bottom line is they wanted taxes to go up. We wanted taxes to go down. They wanted spending to go up. We want spending to go down. So, of course, they don't like this bill. But again, it's going to be there. The president is a great messenger on these topics, and he's going to continue to make sure Americans realize every family is going to benefit from this bill. Like, look, if you're not willing to work, you're able-bodied, you're not willing to work, you're probably not going to be able to get a free ride on Medicaid anymore. But again, the majority of Americans agree with that.
Yeah, in fact, help us out here. They keep saying all these people are going to be thrown off Medicaid, and it appears to me the only ones who are going to be thrown off are the ones who weren't supposed to be on there in the first place. When did we remove means testing? When was it set up that, a 30-year-old who is perfectly capable of working gets free health care from their given state funded by the federal taxpayer?
Well, that's what happened during the Biden administration. And again, the bottom line is Obamacare moved a whole lot of healthy, able-bodied people onto Medicaid. The program was never meant for that patient population. But again, Obamacare moved them on, and Biden made certain people stayed there.
Was that because of the pandemic, Congressman?
No, it was because of Obamacare. I mean, Obamacare said that we're going to move healthy, able-bodied adults, whether or not they're willing to work or not, we're going to move them onto Medicaid,
Gotcha.
A program always designed for the disabled, the pregnant, for children, the elderly. I mean, it was just a complete distortion of the Medicaid program.
An abomination, if I may. So, Congressman, do you have the votes? Is there going to be any surprise this morning? Because on some of those rules overnight, it seemed touch and go there.
Well, look, on our side, with regards to the Freedom Caucus, we're going to deliver the votes for the president. Again, are there some moderate members who listen too closely to what the Democrats say? We're about to find out. But I think it's going to pass. I think almost every Republican is going to vote for it. There may be a couple who don't, but I think it will pass.
Do you have a timeline on when you think this is going to happen this morning? What have you been told?
It's whenever Hakeem Jeffries runs out of steam.
My, good luck with that.
Oh, dear.
All right, and as far as when you say there's some moderates who are concerned or are listening to Democrats, aren't there also some conservatives who are listening to Tom Massey?
No, I think most of them realize, and again, partly because some of the negotiations and discussions that have occurred overnight, that this bill, that the good parts of this bill outweigh some of the problems that are in the bill. No bill's perfect, but I think they realize that. So I think it's going to be close, but I think the president is going to come out on top on that.
Well, listen, when Julie asks what's the messaging here, I got to tell you, if you don't pass this bill and taxes go up on the average family about $2,000, but you do pass the bill and your average family gets upwards to $4,000 or $5,000 of tax break, pretty easy to message that, I would think.
Absolutely.
All right, Congressman Andy Harris, have fun today. Did you get any sleep?
A couple hours, that's all.
Well, you and me both. All right, thanks, Congressman. Appreciate
Thanks.
it. It is 6:43.
Hey, it's Chris Plant. Find out what the media don't want you to know. Coming up this morning at 9, right here on WMAL.
Well, we have another sad example of why home rule is a failed experiment here in Washington, D.C., and Congress should step in and take their constitutional role in oversight and management of the District of Columbia. We have learned overnight that a 21-year-old University of Massachusetts Amherst student who was in town as a congressional intern, his name is Eric Tarpinian Jacquem, was murdered in Northwest D.C., caught in the line of fire on 7th Street. Northwest near M Street. And this is, every major city has crime, and D.C. has terrible crime, but our city is different. The American people coming from places like Massachusetts or Kansas or Montana, they're not used to this kind of thing. And the American people who come here to petition their representative to engage in their civic duty in Washington, D.C., their capital, or young men and women like this, 21 years old, coming as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, optimistic, and excited intern to work for a congressman, as this young man did for Representative Ron Estes of Kansas. They come here. They deserve to have safe streets. They deserve to be able to walk in the heart of our city without worrying about getting caught up in the line of fire as this young man did. We deserve better in our capital city, Julie, and this just breaks your heart, and it also tells you exactly why this dysfunctional government is supposed to serve not just the people who live here, but all of our country, and they have failed. They have failed at their responsibility.
I came here as an intern when I was still in college. I remember navigating the streets of D.C., being frightened. I lived up in Northwest, but I actually worked in a pretty rough area of the town, and it scared me terribly. Today, young interns coming to this city, I think there is some cleanup of Union Station, but just a year ago, you couldn't go there. My husband several times told me to stay away from Union Station and other areas. It is a shame. I pray for this family who got this horrible news. I think about my own parents. When I remember, I will never forget, I was laying in my parents' room. I was laying on the bed with my mom, and she was not happy that I was going to DC to intern. And I never will forget, she said, "Why can't you just be a waitress like normal kids?" Right? And my dad said, "Why are you going to Washington to work for free?" And they were so nervous. They were so nervous. And I think about this mother and father that got that call last night. It is horrifying. It is deeply embarrassing for the city of Washington. And the leaders of the city of Washington should hang their heads in shame at this news.
And for everybody who says, "Oh, well, that's what you get in D.C., it's all Democrats voting," it's like, yeah, you're right. You're right, actually. We get the government that has been voted for by the people who live here. But here's the problem. Unlike any other city, we all participate in this city. This is our capital city. So you don't have to live in D.C. to be a part of what goes on here. And that's why home rule is a disaster. That's why our nation's capital should not be left up to the whims of the feckless and irresponsible voters who live here. Because they create the climate where Muriel Bowser and the district council can just ignore the rampant crime, violent crime that has infested this city for the last several decades. This young 21-year-old college intern at 10:28 at night with a couple of friends in just east of Logan Circle. It's not generally a bad neighborhood necessarily, but every neighborhood is bad now in Washington.
That's right.
And multiple suspects emerge from a vehicle and open fire randomly on a group of people. 3 victims struck, including this young intern. It's not believed that he was the target of this assassination attempt, but it doesn't matter to his family. He's dead now. And this city is an absolute embarrassment in this country, and home rule needs to end. And President Trump has talked about it. And I hope that that's on the agenda for I know it's only been 5 months, so he's got a lot on his plate. But let's get this done, and let's bring sanity back to Washington, D.C. streets. It's 6:52.